There exists a specific psychological behavior, a deeply unsettling signal that reveals you have been selected as a target. Carl Jung first identified this insidious pattern among his most destructive patients, those individuals who ruined lives while maintaining a perfect facade of innocence. This is far beyond mere conflict or bullying. Jung recognized it as a subconscious mechanism, something exponentially more sinister than simple malice or cruelty. The deadliness of this mechanism lies in its profound subtlety. It frequently masks itself as genuine concern or sounds like a helpful attempt to guide you. Yet beneath this veneer of compassion, a targeting system operates, precise, focused, and so profoundly unconscious that the perpetrator is utterly convinced they are the hero, the well-meaning individual doing the right thing. Today, we will examine the precise signal you must watch for. Once you identify it, you will immediately grasp why Jung advised that psychological withdrawal is your only viable protection. The specific behavior Jung documented is defined by an absolute, unshakable conviction that operates entirely without evidence. It manifests when someone accuses you of intentions or motivations you utterly lack, asserting their claims with absolute 100% certainty. They bypass terms like "I think" or "maybe." Instead, they declare precisely who you are, what you feel, and what you secretly desire, all with unassailable confidence. And here is the truly disturbing element. Absolutely no amount of rational explanation can disrupt their certainty. You could present undeniable proof, introduce supporting witnesses, or even submit your entire life to objective inspection. None of these facts will matter. Their conviction is fundamentally immune to reality. Jung documented this exact pattern across hundreds of clinical cases. He observed that his most destructive patients invariably shared this singular trait, an uncanny ability to define and characterize others with absolute certainty, while simultaneously remaining utterly blind to their own inner workings and motivations. When Jung gently suggested that their perception might, perhaps, be distorted, the response was immediate defensiveness, often escalating to aggression. The mere implication that they could be mistaken about you fundamentally threatens the integrity of their entire psychological structure. Being wrong about the target would force them into the intolerable act of self-reflection. And that is the one outcome their unconscious mind is meticulously organized to prevent. This process is known as shadow projection, operating at its most dangerous and lethal level. But before proceeding, a crucial distinction must be made. You are not selected as the target because you are weak, nor are you chosen because of some inherent flaw or wrongdoing. In fact, Jung discovered the exact reverse. You become the target precisely because you are differentiated. You possess a level of psychological development that renders you a functional mirror. You reflect back to the projector those aspects of themselves they refuse to acknowledge, traits they have buried so deep they no longer recognize their existence. Consider the function of a true mirror. It reveals reality exactly as it is. It offers no flattery, and it cannot lie. Now, imagine an individual who has devoted their entire existence to fabricating a false self-image, the person who believes they are inherently kind but is actually cruel, the one who insists they are honest yet operates through constant deception, the person who views themselves as selfless while acting purely on self-interest. What is their reaction upon encountering such a mirror? They don't register their actual self. They see a profound threat. They perceive an enemy. They see someone who must be neutralized and destroyed. That mirror is you. You are not actively harming them. You are simply maintaining your authentic presence. Your psychological clarity and your fundamental refusal to participate in collective delusions, all these qualities function as the intolerable mirror. Individuals burdened by a vast, unintegrated shadow cannot withstand this reflection. Therefore, they attack. This attack is not conscious. It demands a self-awareness they utterly lack, but it is launched unconsciously. with the absolute fanatical conviction that they are right and you are unequivocally wrong. Jung termed this rejected aspect the shadow. Every human harbors a shadow, the collective sum of traits, impulses, and capabilities we reject within ourselves, the things we refuse to admit we are capable of. For most, this shadow remains mostly contained. However, when a person carrying a large, unintegrated shadow encounters someone like you, someone who unconsciously embodies the traits they have denied, a dangerous dynamic takes hold. The projection trap activates. This is the mechanism. If they label you manipulative, they are fundamentally the ones engaging in manipulation. If they accuse you of selfishness, observe how they themselves are acting self-interestedly. If they declare you cruel, examine their recent behavior, and you will find the precise cruelty projected onto you. This is not a matter of chance. It is a psychological law. Whatever qualities we cannot tolerate or accept within ourselves, we are compelled to see and must see in others. We must hold this view with absolute certainty, because any inkling of doubt would trigger the terrifying necessity of introspection. This is the ultimate barrier the unconscious mind maintains. The initial projection, however, is merely the prelude. The true danger follows. Jung termed this phase collective possession. The projector cannot contain their distorted reality. They must disseminate it. They actively recruit others, gathering what are commonly referred to as flying monkeys or enablers. They initiate conversations to share their concerns about you, always, of course, presented from a position of profound, apparent care. They express worry about your well-being, report noticing troubling behavioral patterns, and claim they simply want to help. The reason this tactic is so devastatingly effective is that the projector genuinely believes their narrative. There is no conscious deception at play. They truly feel worried, and they sincerely perceive you as the sole source of the problem. This means they speak with authentic concern, and that very authenticity is compelling. The human mind is wired to trust perceived, genuine emotion. When the projector expresses heartfelt anxiety regarding your behavior, others heed their warning. They begin to question you. They start viewing you through a different filter, gradually perceiving the very threat the projector sees, even though that perceived threat is nothing more than the projector's own psychological shadow. Jung noted that this process unfolds with startling velocity, often faster than the target can react. By the moment you realize your character is being dissected, discussed, and analyzed behind your back, the collective narrative is already cemented. Opinions are fixed. Your identity has already been determined based on someone else's psychological projection. You are now placed in the impossible position of attempting to prove a negative, trying to demonstrate that you are not the person they claim you are. You must defend against accusations so vague and subjective that they are structurally impossible to disprove. This is the point where social isolation rapidly sets in. Individuals within your social orbit begin, one by one, to view you exclusively through the projector's distorted lens. This shift is rarely about your actions. It stems from the deeply ingrained human need for social cohesion. When a projection is delivered with absolute certainty, others feel immense psychological pressure to align themselves. It is always easier to consent than to risk standing alone, simpler to accept the collective consensus than to trust one's own conflicting personal observations. Jung documented this exact pattern in the dissolution of families, professional environments, and even whole communities. The target becomes increasingly isolated, desperately fighting multiplying and nebulous accusations. This leads to the most insidious phase, the gaslighting effect. When you are relentlessly told by multiple sources that you are something you know you fundamentally are not, you inevitably begin to doubt your own sanity. You start to internalize the possibility that they might be correct, that you, in fact, are the underlying problem, and your self-perception has been flawed all along. Jung famously termed this the reality distortion field. The projector constructs a meticulously detailed alternate reality that feels completely authentic to them and, crucially, increasingly real to everyone they recruit. You remain trapped in the center of this field, experiencing the consistent sensation that Jung's patients described, the feeling of being hunted, not physically but psychologically, as if an invisible target has been fixed to your back, visible only to those under the field's influence. Your autonomous nervous system registers the threat long before your conscious mind can label it. You feel unexplained anxiety in their presence. You begin to constantly second-guess every word you utter. You start walking on psychological eggshells, frantically attempting to preempt the next unfounded accusation. Yet none of your adjustments matter, because the conflict is not rooted in your actual behavior. It is about their shadow, and the shadow always manages to locate what it requires. Jung wrote extensively on the somatic cost of these projections, observing that targets frequently developed acute physical symptoms: insomnia, severe digestive issues, and debilitating chronic fatigue. Your physical body is reacting to a threat that your rational mind cannot adequately name. How does one begin to explain that they are being psychologically stalked? How do you accurately convey the sensation of another person's unconscious shadow being projected onto you with such overwhelming force that you start to doubt its falsity? How do you articulate the shock of watching an entire group systematically organize around an utterly fictitious narrative of your character? Most targets find themselves incapable of articulating this experience. They suffer in isolation, assigning blame inward. They relentlessly question their actions, trying desperately to be better, more acceptable, or whatever they believe will finally halt the projection. But the projection never ceases, because it is entirely unrelated to you and wholly tied to the internal truths the projector is unwilling to confront. We now arrive at the most perilous stage, when the target begins to believe the fabrications. This was the exact moment Jung feared most in his therapeutic practice. When a person subjected to relentless projection starts to internalize those claims, they begin to think, perhaps I am manipulative. Maybe I am selfish. I must be the villain in this dynamic. Once this psychological wound is inflicted, the resulting damage can require years of rigorous work to heal. But Jung identified an even more disturbing layer. In many instances, your selection was not random. You were specifically chosen because the social system, the family, the workplace, the group, required a scapegoat. Every social structure, family systems, corporate cultures, and friendship circles possesses collective shadow material that it cannot consciously acknowledge. These are the dysfunctions they refuse to admit, the systemic problems they will not confront. When such a system seeks to avert its own darkness, it demands an individual to bear the burden. That designated carrier is you. This is not because you are genuinely dysfunctional, but because you are sufficiently distinct or differentiated to make your selection as the problem believable. Perhaps you are more sensitive, possess greater psychological awareness, or simply see truths others actively ignore. Regardless of the trait, you have been cast into a crucial role within a psychological drama that predates your arrival. The scapegoat, the identified patient, the one who carries the collective burden the others refuse to touch. Jung documented the precise balance this achieves, particularly in family systems. One child is designated the problem, while the parent's marriage disintegrates. One employee is labeled difficult, while the company's leadership fails. One friend becomes the drama magnet, while the dysfunction of the others remains safely concealed. The system maintains its fragile equilibrium by sacrificing you. And this is the element that makes escape virtually impossible. The harder you try to establish your innocence, the guiltier you appear. The more vigorously you defend yourself, the more pathologically defensive you seem. Every effort you make to correct their fundamental misperception is simply reinterpreted as further evidence that you are exactly who they claim you are. You are caught in a psychological double bind. Speak up and confirm their projections, or remain silent and tacitly accept their projections. There is no path to victory within their established framework. Jung referred to this paralyzing dynamic as the defense trap. He witnessed it constantly. A patient would arrive, desperate to dismantle the false perception held by their family or community. They would present factual evidence, meticulously recount events, and detail their actual intentions. And Jung was forced to deliver what he deemed the most difficult truth in psychology. Your defense is irrelevant. This is not an engagement with a rational, objective evaluation of your behavior. You are dealing instead with an unconscious imperative, a deep psychological need to avoid confronting one's own shadow. And unconscious needs are fundamentally immune to the power of logic or fact. Consider the effect when you instinctively defend yourself against a baseless accusation. You counter, "No, that is entirely untrue. Here is the factual account." What the projector registers is not your explanation, but this. They hear you denying their fundamental reality. They hear you invalidating their carefully constructed perception. They hear you attacking their subjective sense of truth. Consequently, they respond by doubling down. Their certainty hardens. They recruit more allies. They aggressively seek more confirmation bias to support their viewpoint. Your attempt at defense becomes the very mechanism that fortifies their conviction. This is precisely why Jung asserted that defending against shadow projection is worse than useless. It is actively destructive to the target. Every defensive action infuses the projection with more power. You validate its significance, demonstrate its control over you, and consequently ensnare yourself deeper within a dynamic deliberately engineered to be inescapable. This realization marks what Jung called the clarity event. It is the moment the target comprehends they cannot resolve this crisis by being kinder, offering clearer explanations, or striving harder to be understood. None of these rational strategies function when contending with unconscious shadow projection compounded by collective possession. The projector is not consciously electing to misunderstand you. Their entire internal psychological infrastructure is structured around the avoidance of their own darkness, which necessitates that that darkness must be externalized and seen in you. Grasping this reality transforms everything. Once you truly recognize the dynamic at play, you cease trying to convince them. You stop defending yourself against accusations utterly divorced from reality. You withdraw from participating in a game fundamentally engineered for your loss. This realization brings profound clarity. The understanding that their perception of you is not your burden. Their shadow is not yours to integrate. Their unconscious turmoil is not yours to carry. However, the intellectual recognition and the emotional feeling of this truth are distinct. Most targets waste months or years attempting to rationalize with the projector, coaxing the group toward the truth and desperately trying to salvage their reputation. Every attempt fails because logic cannot resolve a problem rooted in the unconscious. Evidence cannot shift a belief that was never constructed upon factual evidence to begin with. The necessary question then is, how do you exit the crosshairs once you've been marked? Jung's solution was radical: psychological withdrawal. While physical distance is sometimes necessary, the core demand is psychological detachment, the ability to fully disengage from their constructed narrative about you. This means letting go of your concern about their understanding and relinquishing your deep-seated need for their validation or approval. While this concept sounds straightforward, it demands an act that most people find psychologically nearly impossible: abandoning the need to be seen accurately. We are intrinsically driven by the desire to be understood, to have others acknowledge our true character. When dealing with shadow projection, however, this very desire transforms into your primary vulnerability. As long as you require them to perceive you correctly, you remain emotionally chained to their distorted judgment. You grant them jurisdiction over your internal world, and that very power feeds the projection, keeping it fiercely alive. Jung taught his patients a profound, counterintuitive lesson. To achieve psychological invincibility, you must internally accept the negative traits of which you are accused. This is not about confirming the accusations as fact, but about integrating your own shadow. Once you have done this, their projections lose all potency. If someone brands you selfish, and you have already quietly acknowledged that yes, like every other human, you possess selfish impulses, their accusation holds no power to wound you. You have already achieved internal peace with that aspect of your humanity. Let's use a concrete example. Suppose someone directly accuses you of manipulation. If you have spent your life meticulously maintaining the belief that you are purely authentic and incapable of such tactics, this accusation inflicts a deep psychological wound. It threatens your entire self-image. Consequently, you defend yourself aggressively. You detail every way you are not manipulative, citing your noble intentions. In doing so, you explicitly signal that the accusation has leverage over you. The projector, sensing this vulnerability, unconsciously presses that specific button even harder. Now, consider the alternative. What if you have already done your shadow work? What if you have acknowledged that yes, you are a human being capable of subtle influence or manipulation? Every human being is. You have undoubtedly swayed people, presented information strategically, highlighted certain truths while minimizing others. This inherent capacity does not make you evil, it makes you human. But once you integrate this capacity, once you accept that manipulation is an available component of the human shadow you possess, the dynamic radically shifts. When accused, you can now respond with genuine curiosity rather than immediate defense. You might even assent, "Yes, I suppose, looking back, I was indeed attempting to influence the outcome. That's an interesting observation." Observe the projector's reaction to this response. They are thrown off balance. They anticipated resistance. They expected denial. They were dependent on the emotional charge that would confirm their projection. Instead, the projector finds themselves facing someone who has already reconciled with their own inherent complexity. This person has no need to uphold an image of being purely good. Having sufficiently integrated their shadow, they can acknowledge uncomfortable, difficult truths about themselves without succumbing to shame. This profound acceptance acts as a shield. It does not fuel the projection, it instantly deflates it. This outcome defines successful shadow integration. The process is the deliberate, conscious recognition of the full spectrum of qualities you possess, including the disagreeable traits you have spent your entire life attempting to deny. Jung's crucial discovery was this: the qualities we suppress are precisely those that gain control over us. The facets of our personality we refuse to acknowledge are the ones that inevitably leak out unconsciously, making us vulnerable. Furthermore, the aspects of ourselves we cannot accept become leverage points others can use for manipulation. However, once you achieve shadow integration, when you can look inward and honestly declare, "I possess the human capacity for selfishness, cruelty, manipulation, and dishonesty, just like every other human being," a profound internal shift occurs. The projector's accusations simply deflect. This is not due to erecting defenses, but because you have ceased to fear these aspects. Having confronted your own darkness and accepted your capacity for what Jung termed evil, there is no internal hook for the projected shadow to attach itself to. This state is psychological invincibility. It is defined not by the absence of inner darkness, but by its complete integration. It is the conscious, acknowledged relationship with your shadow, a task Jung considered the most critical psychological endeavor any person could undertake. An integrated shadow is not eliminated, Rather, it transforms into an indispensable source of psychological power. The very traits you were conditioned to reject become the fuel for your inner strength and competence. But reaching this state demands a terrifying honesty most individuals strenuously avoid: the brutal willingness to abandon the illusion that you are a purely good person. You are human, which inherently means you harbor the potential for every quality you observe in the external world. The decisive difference lies in whether you consciously acknowledge this potential or deny it, thereby allowing these forces to unconsciously govern your life. Jung's patients who completed shadow integration consistently reported a remarkable phenomenon. They ceased to be targets. This shift was not based on altered external behavior, but on a palpable change in their psychological energy. Projectors found they could no longer gain traction. Accusations simply slid away, and the projector's reality distortion field failed to take hold. This marks the powerful transformation from victim to observer. When you can regard someone projecting their shadow onto you with genuine curiosity rather than immediate defensiveness, you have effectively withdrawn from their psychological jurisdiction. You are no longer an active participant in their unconscious drama, you are merely witnessing it. Jung discovered that non-judgmental witnessing is among the most potent acts a human being can perform. Because when you witness without judgment, something interesting happens. Occasionally, though certainly not always, the projector's own consciousness begins to waver. They sense that their projections are failing to land, that you are not providing the expected reactive fuel demanded of a target. In that critical gap, where their aggressive projection meets your integrated self and finds zero purchase, a moment of nascent awareness can potentially emerge. While it is never your mandate to force this change or enlighten them, your state of integration sometimes creates the possibility for their own awakening. Jung documented several clinical cases illustrating this exact mechanism. A patient who had served as the family scapegoat for decades undertook profound shadow work. They integrated the parts of themselves they had long denied and ceased defending against the family's relentless projections. The result was remarkable. The underlying family system began to destabilize. Without a designated scapegoat to carry the collective shadow, individual family members were forced to confront their own issues. Some successfully engaged in this confrontation, others merely located a new target. But the patient, the one who had done the integration work, achieved ultimate freedom. Not because their family structure changed, but because the patient fundamentally changed their relationship to the projections aimed at them. This demonstrates Jung's definition of psychological freedom. It is not attained by trying to control what others think or say about you, nor by attempting to convince them of an accurate perception. Freedom is achieved by becoming so psychologically solid in your self-knowledge that their misperceptions become irrelevant. They are free to believe whatever narrative they require. You, conversely, possess an unshakable core of knowing who you are, a certainty rooted in honest self-examination, impervious to denial or defense. More often than not, the projector will simply abandon you for a new target, someone whose shadow is less integrated, someone who will offer the reactive defensiveness and desperation necessary to sustain the projection. And that is acceptable. Your mission was never to fix the projector or force them to acknowledge reality. Your singular, lifelong task is simply this: to know yourself so thoroughly that no external story or accusation can ever compromise that foundational certainty. This is the context for Jung's observation. Some people either get destroyed by their awareness or transformed into something extraordinary. Individuals who clearly perceive the mechanics of shadow projection are presented with a binary choice. They can allow the gaslighting, isolation, and collective psychological possession to shatter their sense of self. Or they can utilize the pain as a profound invitation for integration. a catalyst to become so psychologically whole that external projection utterly fails. If you recognize the experiences I am describing, the sensation of being inexplicably targeted, the phenomenon of a group turning against you based on reality-divorced accusations, then understand this critical truth. You are not insane. You are not the flaw in the system. You were selected precisely because your emergent presence threatened an unconscious psychic structure that mandated a scapegoat for its continued functioning. And that dynamic will persist until enough individuals prioritize personal integration over external projection. But you cannot undertake their shadow work for them. You cannot compel them to see their actions. You cannot use logic, evidence, or emotional appeal to awaken a collective possessed by unconscious forces. All you can do is withdraw your essential energy from their drama. All you can do is integrate your own shadow so completely that their projections lack any viable landing site. All you can do is become so psychologically unassailable that their reality distortion field cannot permeate your core self. This is the definitive path Jung prescribed for patients navigating the devastation of shadow projection. The answer is not fighting back, not defending your innocence, and certainly not attempting to win a game with rigged rules. The answer is integration. Shadow work is the brutal, honest, and transformative process of achieving wholeness. And wholeness, Jung asserted, is the only genuine defense against psychological assault. Why? Because you cannot be wounded by accusations you have already made peace with internally. You cannot be destroyed by the darkness you have already embraced as an undeniable aspect of the human condition. So, if you recognize this pattern of targeting, the absolute conviction devoid of evidence, the immunity to facts, the co-option of others into a distorted narrative, the gaslighting that eroded your sanity, know this: you were selected to serve as a mirror. And mirrors pose an existential threat to those who cannot bear the sight of their own reflection. But you don't have to shatter simply because they cast stones. You can elect to cease reflecting their unintegrated shadow. You can choose integration over victimhood, wholeness over the endurance of wounds. And when you commit to that choice, when you fully engage in the shadow work that Jung deemed vital for psychological survival, you transform into something untouchable by the projector. Not because you're perfect, not because you have no darkness, but because you've looked at your darkness directly. You've integrated what they still deny. And that integration is your freedom. That wholeness is your power. That radical self-knowledge becomes your impenetrable shield. Let me tell you what happens after integration. After you've done the work of accepting your full, complex humanity, the synthesis of darkness and light, you will observe a strange new reality. The people who used to trigger you don't anymore. The accusations that used to wound you simply deflect. The social dynamics that formerly ensnared you become utterly transparent. You can see exactly what's happening psychologically. You understand the game, but your interest in participating has vanished. Importantly, this transformation does not result in coldness or emotional detachment. Jung was unequivocal. Integration does not diminish compassion, it enhances discernment. You retain the capacity to love and care for others, but you stop sacrificing your essential psychological integrity to sustain relationships founded upon mutual projection and denial. You no longer twist yourself into knots, trying to be acceptable to people who need you to be their scapegoat. You simply retract your vital energy from any dynamic that necessitates you being less than whole. And here's what Jung promised his patients. Once you reach this level of integration, once you become truly psychologically sovereign, you attract a different caliber of human connection. You start connecting with others who have also committed to their own shadow work. Others who can meet you in authenticity instead of projection. Others who don't need you to carry their unconscious material. These relationships feel different, easier, more real, because they're based on the conscious choice of two integrated individuals, not on the friction of unconscious needs and projections. This, ultimately, is the latent gift concealed within the experience of being targeted. It forcefully compels you to undertake the necessary psychological labor that most avoid for a lifetime. It pushes you toward integration, whether willingly or unwillingly, because maintaining the role of the victim eventually becomes unbearable. Defending yourself is simply too depleting. Eventually, you're left with only one choice: do the shadow work, integrate and achieve wholeness, or stay trapped in a dynamic designed to systematically erode your core sense of self. If this discussion has illuminated your personal experiences, comment below and confirm that you recognize this pattern. And if you wish to delve deeper into Jung's potent insights regarding the psychological patterns that elude most people, make sure you subscribe, because understanding shadow projection is only the gateway. There's an entire realm of profound psychological wisdom waiting for those brave enough to look.